with. We'll begin with the first word, which is gird. Gird is a verb, and it means to prepare for a confrontation. It really means to prepare for a military attack, but it's used more loosely to refer to readying oneself for any kind of confrontation. And when you gird yourself for something, you're really preparing for the worst case scenario. Gird can also mean to fasten something tightly, or it can mean to surround or encircle. So you might see it used in a sentence describing trees. Like a field that is girded by trees is surrounded and encircled by trees at every angle. But I want to go back to the main use, which is to prepare oneself for a worst case scenario. Note that in most contexts, the word is followed by a reflexive pronoun. So I'll give you a couple of examples. She marched through her campaign office like a candidate from almost anywhere in the world, girding herself to address a group of reporters. That was a sentence from the New York Times just a few days ago, and you'll notice the word gird is followed by herself. Okay, here's another one from the New York Times. Malaysian officials and Malaysia Airlines are girding themselves for legal and financial fallout from the plane's disappearance. So if you want to use this word, make sure to follow it by the pronoun that refers back to the subject in the sentence. The next word is daunt, and you've probably heard of daunting. Daunt is a verb meaning to cause to lose courage, okay? I want you to think of the cowardly lion in The Wizard of Oz, who appears at first to be easily daunted, but in fact he shows some unusual courage by the movie's end. But still, his efforts to daunt Dorothy, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, were less than successful, right? He tries to make them lose courage at one point in the movie, okay? Another way to think of it is when bringing home a new kitten, you don't want to daunt it by forcing it out of its carrier too soon. So you'll open the door and let it come out when it's ready. Daunt means to frighten or scare off, and a good way to remember it is that it rhymes with the word haunt, which is another word you know, meaning to frighten. Okay? Daunt, last thing to know is that daunt often shows up as part of the adjective undaunted, which describes someone who is unafraid and perseveres in the face of a scary situation. Okay? All right, next word is flux, and flux is a noun, and it basically describes something that constantly changes. So if your likes and dislikes, your attitudes, your dreams, and even your friends are changing all the time, you may describe yourself as being in flux. And flux can also describe being unsure about how to respond to something while you're waiting for something else to happen. So let's say you have a really good job interview and you feel confident that you'll get an offer. In the meantime, your friend invites you to go to Florida with her. You don't know what to do because you don't want to miss the call from your potential employer, right? But you also don't want to miss a trip to Florida. And you're really in flux until you hear from the employer, okay? Next word is hovel. And hovel is a word with a negative connotation. It's a small shed that's often messy or cramped. It's crudely built. Think of a shelter in a refugee camp, or possibly your bedroom if you have too much stuff and not enough time to clean. This word actually dates back to the 15th century. It was used to describe a shed for animals. And then by the 17th century, it had taken on its current usage as a way to describe a really poorly built human dwelling. But the connotation of messiness associated with animals still remains. So the word can literally be used to describe something that is a ramshackle building or dwelling. But you'll also hear it used with humor to describe a person's pretty decent living quarters, right? Kind of sarcasm. You might say, well, I'm off to my hovel to get some sleep. And you would be sort of, intending to be ironic or humorous there. But typically it's used to describe a really crude shelter. And again, you can think of maybe a shelter in a refugee camp, for example. All right, next word, cadaverous. What word do you see in this word? Cadaver. A cadaver is a corpse, and so cadaverous is an adjective that basically relates to a cadaver or a corpse. Okay, the adjective literally means like a cadaver, and it comes from the Latin word cadaver, meaning dead body. And this word actually comes from another Latin word, cadere, meaning to fall. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly. I'll have to ask Ms. Trumper, but it's spelled C-A-D-E-R-E, okay? You don't have to be dead to look cadaverous, though. If your cheeks are sunken and your ribs poke through your torn t-shirt, you're going to look cadaverous, and it's definitely not a compliment, right? Another way to think about this word or another context might be Halloween. You might go for a cadaverous look with green tinted makeup and black circles under your eyes if you're trying to dress up as some kind of ghoul or some other scary figure. Okay? Actually, I want to mention one more thing. Sometimes people will use the word to describe a person's eyes if they're really sunken in. So you might say that she gazes out of cadaverous eyes, looking thin and sickly. It's not a good adjective. Okay, our next word is Gothic. And Gothic is an interesting word that has lots of definitions. In the sentence that we first studied, it was referring to a literary movement that is defined by gloom and the supernatural. So if you remember reading any of Edgar Allan Poe's works, maybe last year in 8th grade, Poe is basically considered a Gothic writer. And obviously a lot of his work is characterized by that darkness, that gloom, etc. Okay? Gothic can also be used to describe a style of painting or sculpture or architecture that basically was produced between the 13th and 15th centuries in Europe. And it can pertain to the music of this period as well. Okay? If you hear the phrase Gothic architecture, you can think of pointed arches and ribbed vaults, lots of fine woodwork, and other features like flying buttresses and ornamental pieces. Okay. Our next word is penury, and it means extreme poverty to the point of homelessness and begging in the streets. So this is a sad word. Economic downturns and job loss, shopping sprees can all lead to penury. This word actually comes from a Latin word, penuria, which, though it sounds like something kind of contagious, it actually means a scarcity or a lack of something. I will say it's not a word that turns up in casual conversation or even on the nightly news, but you'll probably spot it in a college textbook or maybe an editorial in the New York Times. So again, it's a state of extreme poverty. And there are a few recent examples. from the New York Times and other similar newspapers. So here's a sentence from the New York Times. For many, even having a job is no insurance against penury. And let's see if there's another one. From Forbes, today there's a way around that corner that doesn't involve penury and divorce. Okay, coming up to the end here. An egress is, so if you want to leave a place, you need a means of egress or a way out, a way to exit, like a door or a window. And this word comes from a Latin word meaning going out. It can also be used as a verb meaning to exit, but it's less frequently used as a verb and more commonly used as a noun. When buildings undergo inspection, one of the main safety features under review is the number and placement of doors and windows, or the means of egress in case of a fire or other emergency. One of the things that is pointed out to you when you're sitting in the movie theater are the means of egress, so you know where to exit in case of an emergency, okay? You tend to see this word being used with the phrase means of, so means of egress, okay? And again, this is not a word that you would probably use in casual conversation, but you know, it's a good word to sort of know. Here's another sentence that was written recently in the New Yorker. We have blocked off the means of egress, meaning we've closed off the exits, okay? Okay. Let's see. Next word is sorry about that. My cat just was eating a bug and I had to go get the bug from him. Okay, our next word is felicity. This is a very, very happy word. And it means a state of happiness or the quality of joy. So picture sitting on the roof with a telescope and an iced tea on a clear, starry night. I think that would be one way to find perfect felicity. It comes from a Latin word again, lots of Latin words tonight. Felicitas, which means happiness. A synonym is blissfulness, and you can say that people, places, and things can have felicity. So here are a few ways that you might use it. His personality was so warm and full of felicity that we felt at ease the minute we met him. Or you can be in a state of felicity. So another example, a full stomach, a fluffy couch, and the felicity of a Sunday afternoon nap. Our last word is despot. And a despot is a cruel, cruel, omnipotent ruler. So a despot wouldn't allow people to speak out against the leadership or really want them to have much freedom at all. This word came into English from French, but it traces all the way back to the Greek word despotes, which means master of a household, a lord, or an absolute ruler. And this word is not just used to describe political leaders who are omnipotent and cruel, but it's often used to describe anyone who abuses power and oppresses other people. It's definitely not a nice thing to call someone a despot, you know, especially within earshot of this person who has absolute power over you. But this may be a word that you could use and hopefully